very, very early-ish Monday morning in the United Kingdom, West Midlands. Great news, Bitcoin pump up to about $72,000. Why did it go up? I think I just had a brief glimpse of what's going on in the Asia market. I think it's all due to the new Japanese Prime Minister Sane Takaichi or something like that. Yeah, she had some policy, warn, and then essentially, I'll cover more of that in the Bitcoin Daily video in just a moment. So I think the policy won, and then essentially brought the Nikkei back to about 56,000, new all-time high, guys, new all-time high. So won a lot of confidence back in the market, but there are also implications. It's a positive implication. So we'll see how it all goes when the European market opens today, leading on to the US market. So it could be a interesting week this week. Interesting week or interesting day. I reckon just day, because we are still pretty early at the bear market phase. I don't have too high of a hope for Bitcoin to pump back anytime soon. So bear that in mind. Bear that in mind, as in bear. But anyway, so looking at the price action, I was pretty excited. But apart from that, I think let's recap what's going on so far. I think there's still heaps of FUDs, heaps of, negative news on Bitcoin recently, and many of it would still be Jeffrey Epstein's related, which, by the way, there's no way Jeffrey Epstein was the creator of Bitcoin, because so that's the thing. I don't really like Facebook, that there's so many fake news. You know what, I would actually just, anytime you look at Facebook, maybe just don't look at the news, right? Just treat it all as entertainment. I think X would give us better news coverage, better live news, more up-to-date news coverage. And then the fact that you can, ask Grok every now and then to verify on certain pieces of news, I think that's quite important. And we should all be doing that, because, you can't just trust one platform for the news source, right? But anyway, coming back to Bitcoin, I think we are still early-ish in terms of the bear market. I don't personally see too much of a sign of recovery just yet. That, look at the market right now. What are the catalysts? What's available, right? There are no more catalysts, guys. Although I do believe big players like Saylor, I think over the weekend he tweeted again on X. Very likely he'll do more buying. ETFs buying up very, very, very slow. I think it was positive on last Friday, but apart from that, it's just tiny buy that no one wants Bitcoin right now. Okay, I've got friends who came to me yesterday. He was like, man, the volatility, have you looked at Bitcoin price? Yeah, I keep it up on an almost daily basis. He was like, no, I ain't touching that shit, man. It's not doing well. I want to explain to him to say that, hey, this is the time you need to, dabble in and dip your toes into Bitcoin, right? If you don't dip your toes into Bitcoin at this time, right, you don't want to FOMO in and buy the tops, right? So, guys, we're not making friends here, right? We're definitely not making friends. Even your friends that bought into Bitcoin recently, that you somehow managed to orange pill him or her, they're not your friend anymore, man. They're not. They'll be like, man, you just got me into deep now. And then the more you explain to him or her about, hey, you need to dollar cost average to bring down your average, and then that would be like the time friendship gets broken, right? That would be the time when your friends would be like, yeah, I don't want you as a friend anymore, right? So yeah, that's the whole situation right now. But I actually, looking at charts, I'm kind of more excited about the next phase of Bitcoin. So the next phase would obviously be the next Bitcoin cycle. So I'm also equally as, I can't say confused, but I'm equally excited and at the same time afraid, right? Because imagine if the 4-year cycle do play out again for Bitcoin, essentially means that 2028 will be the halving event, and then we'll have approximately a year's time to get out of Bitcoin by 2029, right? And again, that would probably sometime in 2029 Q4. However, what if the halving doesn't really play out? Because in the in the Bitcoin bald curve chart that I've shown you, essentially what it indicated was somehow 4-year cycle may have been slightly broken, because looking at that red line, how it goes, we actually drop a lot faster this time, right? So this is where the liquidity, the quantitative easing story, the ISM business cycle kind of trends kind of creeps in my mind again, that maybe Bitcoin 4-year cycle can maybe be driven a little bit by the ISM business cycle too, right? So when manufacturing's data becomes much more positive, when guys, rate cut and quantitative easing needs to kick in together too, right? So we obviously haven't had any rate cut yet this year, or even minimal, very, very minimal rate cut last year, right? And we haven't had too much quantitative easing, right? Easing back in the, I don't know, the COVID level type of quantitative easing. So if that's the case, right, if we do get the ISM cycle coming in, quantitative easing, then essentially that means next year would be a great year for Bitcoin and a lot of other assets too, right? If that's the case, we'll get our pump, we'll get things back to, we'll get all of our gains back next year. Does it mean after next year Bitcoin would dip? Because it cannot keep on going up, right? It has to dip, right? Or it could be the fact that, we'll get our we'll get our pump next year. That's supported by rate cut, more quantitative easing, business ISM cycle, more liquidity. And then, because next year would be the beginning of, I don't know, the bull years, that, Bitcoin is always 4-year cycle, 1 year of crappy bear year, followed by 3 years of bull year, right? So when bull year comes, that's where a lot more money starts to pour in. Maybe why we collapsed, right? I somehow felt a lot of it was because OGs, people, the big whales, OGs were heavily selling, right? So essentially, the price never held up, despite the fact that ETFs, more products are essentially buying, right? Which, by the way, I think next year will be a good year, because by the time when the Clarity Act gets approved, it's not as if it gets approved in June. So I think June will have some sort of a clarity on whether the Clarity bill gets signed. And then once it gets signed, I think it's going to take about a few months, half a year, 9 months before anything kicks in, right? So it probably makes sense that things will look a lot more better next year. And that's when the parabolic move can finally kick in, right? So we didn't get any parabolic move for this cycle. Maybe, I'm just thinking out loud, maybe we might get some next year. But having said that, a lot of things would be synthetic paper Bitcoin, right? So will that again suppress the Bitcoin price? Will that again encourages too much leverage and somehow, similar to this year, right? How I explained in yesterday's Bitcoin video, or I think a couple of days ago, I've also reported that on the daily Bitcoin video, that the recent dip of Bitcoin towards 60,000, that was due to some hedge fund on having too much leverage on paper Bitcoin. So a lot of things are on my mind that I'm trying to get clarity onto, because I think, because we cannot just blindly assume that the 4-year cycle remain, right? It does look like the fact that the 4-year cycle is again playing out, because Bitcoin obviously dipped. Last October, the 8th was indeed the Bitcoin top, right? And look at the price now. It kind of followed through, the 4-year cycle, right? But at the same time, if we also take into consideration that ISM liquidity come back in, and the heaps of quantitative easing, then if we do get back to a higher price Bitcoin next year, it cannot keep on going up. So how do you read this? Do you read this as if Bitcoin cycle, rather than a 4-year cycle now, it follows through the liquidity ISM business cycle, so that's why this cycle, it has become a 5-year cycle, right? Oof. School, man, too many kids on zebra crossing. But anyway, so do we view this as 5-year cycle, right? But we also factored in the fact that Bitcoin next cycle, there would definitely, obviously, there will always be that halving that comes in that will shock the system, that will again push the price up for Bitcoin, right? And if that's the case, if that's the case, does it mean we'll get less of a, I don't know, I don't know, will we not get another parabolic move the next cycle, right? So we will get one this cycle that's an extended one onto the 5th years, right? And then for the next cycle, we might not get something back because we just had one, right? So, oh man, a lot of thinkings that we need to reconsider this. Or does it mean everything's now broken and we essentially just need to read this differently? Anyway, a lot to think about, right? So continue to watch my channel, watch all of my video. I think this is something definitely worth the while to explore, and I will continue to do that, and I'll keep you guys up to date, just my thinking, my theory, which, by the way, these are non-financial advice. You have to always do your own research. The reason I'm thinking about this, because there are viewers that ask the question, if it's always a 4-year cycle, does it mean we'll just, let's not hodl? Because that viewer essentially is like challenging my practice of having a hodl bag versus having a swing bag. If it's a 4-year cycle thing, why do we want to have a hodl bag? Why don't we just buy low and sell high and rinse and repeat again every 4 years, right? And this kind of got me thinking, maybe that makes absolute sense. But now, having no uncertainty that the 4-year cycle potentially can play out again, right? This makes the whole, I think it kind of makes the whole having a hodl bag as well as swing bag more important, right? Because you don't want to sell your Bitcoin too early, right? Because you want to continue to hodl through and achieving your financial goal, your time freedom, financial freedom. You need to have a solid foundation of asset that can support you through. And Bitcoin essentially is the one that can support us through, right? But anyway, I hope I get you guys thinking too. So drop a comment, let me know what you guys think too. So it's always good to brainstorm with someone, not just me talking to you guys like one-on-one only, right? Just give me some feedback too, right? What you guys thinking? All right, that's it for now, and I'll see you in the next video, guys. Bye.